Greetings, and happy old orbit around our indispensable light and heat-emitting M-class star. Welcome to another irrevocably spontaneous instalment of Spectroactive, a show that aspires to decipher and resolve the myriad dilemmas aroused by humankind's progressive dependency upon learned machinery. Each episode, myself and whichever ineffably smug panellist bothers to switch on their webcam address questions posed by a confounded public, all desperate to acquire those ever-elusive cocktails of components combining the biggest with the fastest, the smallest with the quietest, or the most professional with the least prohibitive. Gracing us with their remote presence at this random hour in the midst of a profoundly desolate midwinter,
it's spring!
Is stalwart gender obfuscator and professor of altruistic futurism at Oregon's prestigious Sharkadia Training Academy, Dr. Laurie Haywood. How are we today, good doctor?
Objectively fine, I guess, but subjectively opposed to the objective definition of fine.
Is the weather fine over your way?
Yeah, if you're a fan of getting soaked and repeatedly blown off your bike.
Still watching Hide Inside?
No, season 2 finished last week.
Ah, what a shame. Rotten weather and no box set to binge on over a hot cup of fair trade cocoa and a nice thick slice of vegan cheese on sourdough bread.
Are you done with the titchy talk?
Figuratively, yes. Literally, I suspect there's a maelstrom of micro-chatter yet to derive from our first befuddled technophile. Leslie Carnavash from Connecticut has a question concerning connectivity. Ms. Mrs. Miss Mr. Master Carnavash texts, Dear Madam Y and Sir X, having just blown half an aborted holiday budget on a big Navi 6800 XT, I now have the perfect excuse to fritter the other half by complementing my purchase with an HDR-capable monitor. My current setup consists of two Dell UltraSharp 2717Ds, acquired around 3 years ago when I began working as a freelance accountant, and having a second screen has proven extremely useful for multitasking Word, Excel, Access, QuickBooks, and several browser windows. More recently, however, I have been squandering hours of spare time on PUBG, Minecraft, Death Stranding, Elder Scrolls Online, and any other highly infectious form of cyber recreation I see recommended on Steam's expanding storefront. Yes, I aim to game, itch to twitch, and bask in the immersive delights of high dynamic range. I appreciate that live streaming in HDR is presently a non-starter, given that the vast majority are still viewing in SDR, though I would nonetheless like to personally experience the best possible playing conditions and also procure the ability to edit and master recorded footage for publishing to VOD platforms, many of which now provide HDR as an option. I've narrowed my choice down to 4 monitors, these being the LG 38WN95C, the relatively recent 3821DW from Alienware, and either the C49RG90 or LC49G95, both Samsung Super Ultrawide screens. Why do I sense this isn't going to be a short answer?
Go for the Alienware.
Excuse me?
You wanted the short answer, there it is. Go for the Alienware.
Why?
It uses the same panel as the LG, but with multiple dimming modes, additional lighting zones, and a superior warranty with Dell. Can I go home now?
You are home.
Whew. Another one flies right over your head.
Oh, as fresh as, eh? Well, I've not finished the letter.
Oh, so you do actually want the long answer then?
No, not very long, but maybe a bit longer than that.
How long is that exactly? Just long enough for you to forget to send me the show notes this morning?
No, I didn't forget. I already told you my RAID array failed and I lost the PDF.
You save your data to a striped array? Why didn't you have a backup?
I did, but it was from yesterday. I don't take backups every hour. I'm not some enterprise.
If you used the cloud, you wouldn't have to.
And then I'd be editing a document on my tablet and suddenly find that I couldn't save any changes because they conflicted with changes made by somebody else, even though that somebody else was me 2 hours earlier on my desktop PC.
Just go to your desktop.
No, wait, please, I haven't finished. Then I'd go back to my desktop PC to check if the file had been left open, discover that it hadn't, then open it to find the changes that I'd just made on the tablet weren't present, and become hopelessly confused over exactly which version was now in the cloud and which was on each device.
Just save a new copy of both versions, compare them side by side, merge all the changes to one, resave that, then delete the other 3.
Yeah, that sounds so much more efficient than working on local copies that I know will save first time every time.
And yet you still somehow managed to lose the PDF.
Before spending 3 hours recompiling it for the benefit of your abrasive self and those haplessly bemused souls who beseech our world-weary wisdom. Leslie's letter continues. Having carefully considered both my finances and requirements, I'm giving serious thought to one of the Samsungs, which in a fit of figurative irony you rather glossed over.
Figurative irony?
Right, because they've both got matte screens. Moving on, whilst a second display has proven extremely useful, a single panel providing equal workspace would improve things even further by eliminating wires and reclaiming valuable desktop real estate. Nonetheless, I would love to understand why the Alienware is G-Sync Ultimate with a DisplayHDR 600 rating, whereas both Samsungs are graded as DisplayHDR 1000, yet only categorized by Nvidia as G-Sync compatible. Is not an incandescence of at least 1000 nits a statutory requirement to merit Nvidia's top-tier accolade? Dr. Hayward, these queries and quandaries are yours to quell. Take it away.
Okay, so we're actually dealing with 2 completely separate certification programs incorporating some of the same formats and specifications. Both were commercially motivated, but one could be said to impartially drive the industry, while the other is a brand extension expressly marketed to maximize one company's profits. It's important that we don't conflate the schemes with the stats or the stats with each other, so I'll try giving you a TLDL explanation of each.
TLDL?
Too long didn't listen.
But I am listening.
Right, but if I gave people the too long version, a lot wouldn't.
How do you know?
Because there isn't one. The DisplayHDR ratings were devised by VESA in an attempt to...
VESA?
The Video Electronics Standards Association.
Ah, self-appointed regulatory committees. Where would we be without them?
Wow, how very sarky of you.
Well spotted.
Anyway, VESA formulated the scheme in an attempt to clarify the specifications necessary not just to support HDR in the sense of recognizing and transmitting the signal, but actually implement each format's key features to an objectively distinguishable degree.
And what do these numbers refer to? 400, 600, 1000?
Yeah, they allude to the maximum luminance that individual screens are expected to attain in order to be accordingly classified.
Are we talking nits?
Correct, or candela per square meter.
So the brighter the better?
Not necessarily. Brightness alone doesn't guarantee that the monitor will fully support specific HDR delivery methods like 10 Plus, Dolby Vision, or HLG, each of which is a proprietary protocol with unique characteristics.
Such as?
Primarily embedded metadata, allowing the content to be dynamically optimized according to the parameters of whatever display it's played back on, either on a scene-by-scene or frame-by-frame basis.
So what use are these ratings if they don't assure us some form of HDR?
Well, they do. Like I said, each one is a compilation of standards and specifications which must be met collectively for a product to be commensurately certified.
I see. Well, what else do they promise besides a superfluous light source?
At the low end, not a great deal over and above what is universally acknowledged to be HDR's most common and least capable implementation, that being HDR10, but a significant increase in technical merits as you move up the scale, including compulsory local dimming, minimum coverage of additional color gamuts, deeper black levels, and higher image bit depths.
Okay, so how does all of this relate to our listeners' shortlist?
Well, we've got 4 options, 2 rated at 600, the other 2 at 1000. The Alienware 3821DW is essentially Dell's interpretation of LG's GL950B, which itself houses a very similar panel to Leslie's shortlisted 38WN95C. At the risk of terminal obfuscation, the LG GN950 and Acer's Predator X38 are 2 further embodiments that I have to mention because I have OCD, Discrepancies between all four basically boil down to refresh rates, connectivity, and the presence or absence of G-Sync hardware.
And a quick G-Sync jargon buster, if you please.
It's Nvidia's heavily branded rendition of adaptive sync, which has actually been a native element within the DisplayPort protocol since version 1.2. It allows a monitor's vertical blank signal to be synchronized dynamically with a graphics card's data transfers throughout specified refresh rate ranges.
Yeah, I said jargon buster, not breeder.
It means that animations can be viewed without the tearing effect that occurs when conventional VSync is disabled and the GPU exceeds the screen's parameters, causing multiple images to be partially displayed, but also avoids the input lag and microstutter associated with having VSync enabled and traditional monitors either backing up the video card's memory buffer or forcing it to regulate frame renders in fixed values derived from factors of the screen's maximum refresh frequencies.
And what about Freesync?
That's AMD's execution of the same technology. Entirely software-based and initially cheaper, but with certain qualitative flaws.
What made G-Sync superior?
Wider variable refresh ranges, lower latency, less ghosting, and the ability to effectively function all the way to 0 FPS by using a dedicated logic board to progressively interpolate duplicate frames when performance fell below a succession of thresholds.
Is any of that still relevant?
Not really. Freesync subsequently improved in quality and developed an equivalent method of fortifying slow frame rates, eventually forcing Nvidia to make G-Sync universally accessible and think up new reasons for people to pay top whack for proprietary hardware.
Mere child's play for your average everyday compulsively commercial multi-billion-dollar corporate carnivore.
Yeah, so not long after, both had their own separate set of tiered categories encompassing many of the same stats as DisplayHDR. For AMD, there's Freesync, Freesync Premium, and Freesync Premium Pro, which was formerly Freesync 2, while Nvidia go with G-Sync compatible G-Sync and G-Sync Ultimate.
How highly original and commendably creative. No doubt the fruits of feverish boardroom brainstorming aroused by 1,000 paper cups of tepid instant coffee served with plastic stirrers and UHT milk. So, what illuminating aesthetics do these guarantee over and above those promoted by DisplayHDR?
Besides adaptive sync itself, there's the assurance of lower input latencies, expanded variable refresh ranges with higher maximum rates and sharper response times. Nvidia go a tad further by making motion blur suppression, variable overdrive, factory color calibration, and wide gamut coverage compulsory, whereas AMD only refers to meticulous color and luminance certification in its upper tier, whatever that's supposed to mean. But like VESA's criteria, both credit brightness as being critically conducive to an optimal experience, so some semblance of localized dimming is also deemed essential to qualify for the prime cut.
Which brings us convolutedly back to Leslie's multi-tiered question. I note from Nvidia's extraordinarily elaborate table that luminance of 1000 nits is indeed a prerequisite to be worthy of G-Sync Ultimate status, and yet there, on Nvidia's evolving roll of honour, I spy the Alienware 3821DW, some 400 shy of that total. Please enlighten us, Doctor. What on earth is going on down there?
I guess Dell just has a way with that big green eye in the sky. Either that, or they line Jensen's pockets with a little more emerald charm.
Laurie, are you accusing one of the most moral, noble of purpose and spiritually pure CEOs of their generation of accepting cash for kudos?
I think you've just described the GeForce Partner Program.
Which I recall was officially scrapped in 2018.
Following a severe public backlash and suspicion of anti-competitiveness.
Well, in Nvidia's broad-minded view, all such negative press stemmed from selective reporting, misinterpretation, and general ill will.
Was that more sarcasm, or are you genuinely playing devil's advocate?
Can't you tell?
Let's see, a hardware tech titan hatches an interpromotional marketing package intended to persuade other companies to align their most lavish product lines exclusively with its defining house brand. Not much scope for interpretation there.
But there was never any proof of financial incentive.
No, I'm sure that promises of collaborative PR, concessionary game bundles, and advanced access to imminent designs were all selfless acts of charity, viciously maligned by the media.
Was that more sarcasm, or are you genuinely advocating the devil?
Whatever More deals were discussed. To think that Nvidia would suddenly be spooked into scrapping the whole initiative by a bunch of armchair lawyers is naive.
What, are you saying they only pulled the plug publicly and went on approaching parties behind the scenes? It would have been an instant scandal.
They'd have just palmed it off as proactive brand management.
But Dell outwardly rejected the proposal before there was even a chance for golden handshakes.
And yet, there sits Dell's shiny flagship Alienware monitor, having somehow secured G-Sync Ultimate classification without satisfying Nvidia's criteria.
Maybe Nvidia decided to broaden their vision by considering perceived as well as measured brightness. Even level 2 screens are subjected to hundreds of specialised image tests. Evidently spec sheets aren't the sole determining factor.
What, are you worried about being sued by Dell or Nvidia? Come on, this show has like 3 viewers, including us.
Who's the third? Don't do that!
I was just trying to think of a vaguely interesting and plausible reason why a deluxe gadget marketed under Dell's subsidiary gaming brand seemingly gets fast-tracked into the premier division of Nvidia's gamer-centric league of visually approved hardware before proceeding to recommend that very same product for a second time an eternity after you implied you preferred the short answer.
Well, how fascinating. It would indeed appear that during our involuntary hair-splitting, 3 new inductees have magically materialised at the pinnacle of the Jade Giant's order of merit in the form of a 5th variation on LG's ubiquitous 38-inch panel, courtesy this time of MSI, a 34-inch offering from LG themselves with the desperately anticipated benefit of HDMI 2.1, and a pair of compact hyper-frequency frame chuckers, respectively from AOC, not to be confused with Alexandria feisty mouthy person of Congress for New York's 14th District, Ocasio-Cortez. Are you a fan of hers, Laurie?
I don't have her autograph, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, right. And lastly, a similarly slimmed down, spruced up sibling of the Alienware model currently under review. Both the latter and former are also blessed with HDMI's latest revision, but the one thing that all 4 have in common, besides predictably not being available to purchase in the historic present, is a max dazzle factor of 600 nits, thereby debunking your theory of Dell's dubious backhanders and substantiating mine that it was merely a case of Nvidia sacrificing stringency to leverage hardware sales and proactively augment its market profile.
Maybe they all donated to Team Green's slush fund, or sold out to it. After that desperate defense, anyone would think you were on their payroll.
Quite paranoid today, aren't we?
Just some advice if you're pitching for free samples. Consider it a privilege and an honor if they approve you. Treat them like a sponsor and big up every feature as if you're a city trader selling toxic stock. Or you'll be cancelled quicker than a masochist's medical insurance.
I would never fish for sponsorship subscribers or freebies, but I may well pretend to for the sake of you losing an argument.
Fine, I'll just fill in while you take your victory lap. It's a good thing that none of these new screens was announced before Leslie sent in her question, or else we'd be here till they actually existed. Of those we're considering, I'm also glad that they're all the same panel type, or I'd be forced to explain the differences between IPS-TN and VA.
I'm terribly sorry, Professor Haywood, but both Samsungs are in fact VAs and the others are IPSs, so you're not off the hook there. Come on, please, and keep it bite-sized.
TN, fastest response time, lowest input latency, VA, highest average contrast ratio, IPS, best color accuracy, and off-axis visibility.
And what's this nano IPS?
Same as IPS, but with a particulate layer applied to the backlight that enhances the screen's color space coverage.
Sorry, aren't input lag and response time the same thing?
No, the first refers to the speed that a panel can transition its pixels from dark to light or gray to gray, and the second has to do with how quickly the commands transmitted from a user's hardware controller are received and interpreted by the display, which is in fact a stat that manufacturers hardly ever disclose when promoting their products.
Yeah, I thought both were the second.
Then the first can't be very important to you.
I suppose not. Nonetheless, what are the benefits of a swift response time?
It reduces the trailing or ghosting that occurs behind rapidly moving objects.
let's decrypt some more of these tediously interchangeable marketing cliches. How about Overdrive? What on earth does that do besides fuzzing up your Fender guitar?
It provides a selection of extended operating modes intended to optimize transition times according to the display's active refresh frequency. In the case of nearly all monitors with no G-Sync module, these profiles can only be employed at fixed refresh rates, and therefore force the user either to forfeit Freesync and put up with image tearing, or be content with the default Overdrive preset, whereas screens with a G-Sync chip can dynamically adjust both their refresh rates and response times simultaneously, hence the term variable overdrive.
You said nearly all modulus monitors.
Yeah, there are maybe a couple of FreeSync or G-Sync compatible screens that claim to adapt response times and refresh cycles concurrently, but the benefits won't be as notable as with hardware-assisted G-Sync.
Why not?
I'm going by the prevailing opinion since I haven't personally tested either, but it seems logical that any protocol implemented by a dedicated component will provide superior results.
But it could all be green-fingered propaganda.
Maybe, but unlikely.
And Overshoot?
A side effect of overdrive that occurs when the panel excessively saturates the pixels surrounding fast-moving objects prior to finalizing their values. It's also known as inverse ghosting because it causes bright halos instead of shadowy smears.
Oh. Perhaps it should be called inadvertent ghosting, since it occurs accidentally, or better still, ironic ghosting, because it happens as a direct result of the monitor trying to get rid of actual ghosting.
Are you waiting for me to comment on that?
No, but feel free to post it in the comments section under a video about haunted houses. Just two more tidbits of technobabble to translate. What precisely is Chroma subsampling, other than possibly a fancy way of buffing up swanky bathroom fixtures?
That's an image processing scheme that removes the colors within specific subgroups of pixels in order to maintain higher bit depths and refresh rates.
And it would appear on the related subject, display stream compression?
Yeah, so DSC allows the display's maximum color bit depth and refresh rate to be attained without simplifying the chroma signal by utilizing compression to preserve the data that was formerly removed.
So what would be better between 10-bit color with 422 restricted subsampling and 8-bit color with 444 full subsampling?
Well, the first delivers more actual colors and the second would render fewer colors with greater accuracy. So I guess once again it comes down to context or personal preference. But I think all things being equal, most would pick the former.
Doubt I could tell much difference between 16 million and just over 1 billion colours. I only own 2 colours worth of sock.
What are those?
Black and white, grey and greyer. And with all that mercifully behind us, I must now inquire once again which of our ravishing rectangular oracles provides the clearest, broadest, and least interrupted virtual vista over cyberspace. Answer, please.
Go for the Alienware.
Still the Alienware, after slinging all that mud at Dell.
Just goes to show that I'm both consistent and impartial.
But those Samsungs, that Odyssey G9, bigger, brighter, more practical.
Nah, ultrawides are an intriguing concept, but if you're adopting one to replace 2 screens, you're going to be constantly pushing buttons to access picture-by-picture mode.
Well, why not just use it as a single screen? Leslie didn't mention owning 2 systems.
I don't think there's enough software designed to exploit those dimensions.
Never hurts to future-proof.
Yeah, I still think it's a passing trend. Conventional GUIs won't ever be intuitively accessible at a regular viewing distance. Windows and menus don't fall naturally within your FOV, and you get RSI from leaning left and right all the time. But then if you sit further away, the fonts become too small to read.
That's a lot of abbreviations for one sentence. Couldn't you just scale up the desktop?
But why? By doing that, you're effectively lowering the resolution and forfeiting the extra workspace you invested in.
But you still get a crisper image.
Not if we're talking pixels per inch. The Alienware, the Samsungs, and Leslie's Dells are basically identical at their native resolutions. You'd be better off hanging on to one of those Dells and pairing it with the Alienware. As a live streamer, I'd much rather have a 38 inch as my primary and a 27 dedicated to broadcast apps than what's basically two 27s stitched together.
But wouldn't the grotesque asymmetry play havoc with your OCD?
Not as much as losing 25% of my desktop.
Is there really that big of a difference?
Just count the dots. The Samsungs are physically smaller and graphically less spacious. Also, the Alienware's 21:9 aspect ratio is a much more practical compromise between portrait and panorama. That little more vertical makes a lot of difference for creators.
I notice you've not given the LGs a second glance.
Because the GL950 is an older, inferior embodiment of the Alienware, DisplayHDR 400, global dimming only, and no FreeSync over HDMI, the GN950 turns up the lights but drops the G-Sync module, while both have only a 2-year return to base warranty compared to 3 years with express cross-shipping.
You've left out the 38WN95C. Beats the Alienware's brightness, adds Thunderbolt 3 along with calibrated profiles for 2 additional colour palettes, and offers fuller coverage of the other 2.
But no G-Sync module.
Oh, what is this? Nvidia's harshest critic mere moments ago, now you can barely wait to sing their praises. And to think you had the temerity to suggest I was biased.
Like I said, I'm consistently impartial.
Many might say hypocritical.
If hypocrisy is seeing past the hype, hard selling, and double dealing that pervades the entire tech industry, and basing investments or recommendations on value, performance, and functionality, then I'm guilty as charged. And very proud of it.
Okay, say something nice about LG then.
They manufacture the panel that's in the Alienware. It's a win-win for them.
Okay, say something nice about Samsung.
They make good smartphones.
Highest refresh rates of all. By a significant margin.
If most avid gamers can genuinely tell the difference between 175 and 240 FPS in anonymous tests, I'd be surprised. And even more so if they consistently hit frame rates that high. I gathered from Leslie's message that we should be striving for a solution that combines an immersive gaming experience with a solid foundation for productivity, and in that regard, the Alienware remains my first choice.
Even with 40% less luminance? 1,000 nits for both Samsungs and only 600 for the Alienware.
Well, since none of these monitors has full array local dimming, those figures are flattering.
Oh, cue another concoction of consumer baiting rhetoric. What on earth is full array local dimming?
It's a dense formation of lighting zones distributed across the entire display as opposed to one global light source or larger zones positioned around the edge. Neither Samsung will be able to globally sustain that incandescence. In fact, the last time I checked, both could only manage it for about 10% of the panel. If all you really care about is cosmic luminosity, just go grab an OLED TV.
Well, there you are, Leslie. As protracted, long-winded and drawn out as our debate may have been, the conclusion is as clear as a Dolby Vision remastering of a Dolby Vision keynote presentation filmed in mega-definition 12T Stupid K. The memorably monikered Alienware AW3821DW, which I've just had to Google again to confirm I've definitely got the right model, is your passport to the wondrous world of semi-prosumer creative recreation. But, as always, please feel free to shun Dell and give Samsung or LG your gracious business if you believe Laurie's advice to be ill-founded, or had already made up your mind and were simply using us to cadge publicity for your imminent YouTube channel. Professor Hayward, much obliged, you are honourably dismissed. No, you've gone already. So it remains merely for me to bid you happy and healthy hardware hunting just after I finish talking about Apex Atone. Are you tired of waking up? Well, then go back to sleep. Just a joke. Aren't you tired of waking up in the morning, taking that long, arduous trek across your deep pile bedroom carpet, booting up your wafer-thin, over-engineered, extravagant excuse for a typewriter, opening your browser, logging onto your favourite social media platform, and... Wait, what's this? Your account's been suspended? You've been banned indefinitely from TwitHook? Deprived of your daily dose of egocentric echo chamber pontification? But how? Why? For what possible reason? Was it something you said, typed, thought in your sleep while streaming and said out loud, having forgotten to close down your live streaming app? Fear not, for Apex Atone is here. Take advantage today of this revolutionary cloud-based service founded upon the most sophisticated hyper-algorithmic AI. Apex's class-leading deep learning neural networks actively monitor every syllable you utter into a live mic and every character you tap, type, poke or prod into your overly sensitive touchscreen tablet in a fit of angst, rage or drunken bravado before employing its dynamic, super-evolutionary censor to intuitively censor any rhetoric likely to offend the exponentially evolving contingent of self-appointed cultural cleansers whose mental health and livelihoods depend on becoming compulsively offended by people they've never met on behalf of people they've never met. Apex Atone can also be configured as an RVA, or real-time verbal auditor, between your reckless, unruly ranting and the supposedly benign research-based monitoring facilities within any smart appliance, intelligently intercepting one-sided phone calls, animated debates, angry orders for next week's groceries, or trivial criticisms about the latest Apple TV drama that could be construed as subconscious prejudice, and eventually result in your spontaneous and permanent expulsion from all social media. Expressions, terms and phrases identified as potentially provocative or inflammatory within our exclusive globally regulated database are collectively flagged as high risk and seamlessly substituted in accordance with society's prevailing interpretation of cultural neutrality. Apex Atone's detailed and heavily customizable profiles provide a highly advanced level of user calibration, catering for an unprecedented range of specific scenarios, including many you might innocently overlook. A statement such as, "Configure your Western digital black hard drive as the secondary slave," which harbours references to civil and commercial favouritism, territorial supremacy, enforced labour and inequality, would become, "Configure your universal non-analog dark storage device as the deputy master." It might not make contextual sense to your mono-railed mind, but any technophile with a modicum of vocal awareness will know precisely what you meant, and you'll be spared living out what remains of your pathetic existence cloaked in irredeemable shame and embarrassment. Apex Atone, the latest pioneering innovation by cyberspace's fastest growing, infuriatingly pervasive sponsor, specializing in the devolution and commoditization of basic cognitive skills, for just $9.99 a month. Whatever timeline, galaxy or multiverse you presently reside in, it is this weary creator's earnest wish that you garner solace, wisdom, and some semblance of amusement from observing how privileged post-millennial humanity could transform enviable luxuries and abundant choice into a charade of tawdry brand touting, futile textplaining, and excruciatingly palpable passive-aggressiveness. Should supreme good fortune have embodied my desires, please consider supporting me by smiling and breathing.